Welcome to Anchoring the Consciousness of Oneness World Summit. Today we have artist and author Jean-Pierre Weill. Jean-Pierre was born in Paris, France in 1954 and spent his formative years in New York. As a young man, he attended St. John's College in Annapolis, Maryland, and enrolled in graduate studies at Columbia University. He resides with his wife, Rachel Rotenberg, a sculptor in Jerusalem, Israel. They have 5 children. He has been a craft artist for 30 years. His paintings on multiple levels of glass have been widely exhibited throughout the world. And in 2014, Jean-Pierre wrote and illustrated a book titled The Well of Being, a children's book for adults, to critical acclaim. A sequel will be published in early 2021. Thank you so much for being here today to talk about oneness with me. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Sarah. It's a delight to be here and to share this with you. I'm going to talk about, I guess, my book, Well-Being, the children's book for adults. It's an illustrated book, heavily illustrated, formatted like a children's book, so that the topic of well-being can be approached as one would approach a children's book, with simplicity and with kind of an open-heartedness. That was the original idea, to write about well-being from a simple orientation that would be, if you want, kind of seductive like a picture book is seductive.
Yes.
Stop thinking so much.
Yes. I mean, it really, having read your book, I've read it many times. I picked it up to just look at it really quickly because I wanted to see what it was, and I'll read it later, and I couldn't put it down. It's, the most, when we can explain things with simplicity, we recognize how profound the message really is. This message of oneness, we tend to, with the mind, overcomplicate and try to, overanalyze, but really the concept of oneness is very simple.
Oh, so true. We tend to, I'm going to just say back what you said, we tend to overanalyze and we complicate things. And often without positive results. I think that we kind of already know what we need to know. At least I like to have that as a kind of a template, that the things that are most important are things that we already know. And it doesn't mean that I can say them in words. It's just that when I recognize something, let's say that I had not heard it before, but that it moves me deeply. I think it has, my experience is that it has a kind of, there's a kind of a recognition. Like I always knew that, I just wasn't able to put that into words. That's very much the feeling I have. Oh, there's a wonder about it. Like it's new, and like I already knew that.
Yeah.
And I think that well-being is like that too. Like, what is that? What is this thing we call well-being? Right?
Yes, absolutely. So can you tell our viewers in your words, what is well-being? What is well-being to you? And how can we, well, we don't need to find it, it's already within us, right? But how do we recognize it?
Right. So, it's funny. I have thought about this topic for years and years. And sometimes it happens that I think about it so much and I lose track, and I don't even know what it is. Like I can't find the words for it. It's very elusive in a certain way. even though what I just said, I think is true, that we already know it. So I think one way that I like to unpack this is to distinguish it from what we mean by being happy. I'm unhappy. No, I'm happy. Well, I'm happy because, Sarah called me up and invited me to do an interview. And now I'm happy because now I get a platform in which to talk about things. And because I have a platform, now I'm happy. Oh, no, now I'm unhappy because something happened that forced a cancellation. I'm using just this immediate situation, but of course, it's the circumstances outside of myself that propel my happiness and my unhappiness. Whereas when I think about well-being, I'm thinking about something else. It's not happiness. In fact, I might be unhappy and I might be in a state of well-being, and vice versa. I think that I can be in a kind of what I'll call happiness. I'll put that in scare quotes, but it's really a happiness that rests on a person who's really out of well-being, and it's very momentary, and it's completely conditional on what's happening outside. So I guess in a word, I would say happiness is what happiness is in my lexicon is something that is extremely temporary and is somewhat out of my control, and that the pursuit of my happiness is the pursuit of getting the circumstances in my life in proper alignment, so that when I find my good partner, I'll be happy. When I find my job, I'll be happy. When I fix my tire on my car by the roadside, I'll be happy. So I guess that's my first
Yeah.
thought about a distinction. Yeah.
Oh.
Now I haven't explained what well-being is, but to say what it isn't. And I think that's helpful because if happiness is conditioned on the circumstances of my life, then I'm going to say that my well-being is not conditional on my circumstances, and that the pursuit of well-being comes from addressing the issues in my life slightly differently. There's a line I like to say, which I shared with you before this interview, which is this: the issue isn't the issue. Like the issue that I'm single and I want to have a partner. The issue isn't the issue. It's my issue with the issue.
Right.
That's the issue. The issue is not that I'm single. The issue is what's going on with me that I'm single and I want to have a partner. Or what's the issue with me that I've just lost my job? Or whatever it is that brought me into happiness or brought me out of it. What's going on with me around it? That relationship, I think, is the one that has everything to do with my well-being.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes sense?
It makes perfect sense. We tend to look out into the external world and search for our happiness. And we can decide at any time what our general mood or state is going to be. as long as we're not focusing on what's out there. It's really what we see out there is really just a mirror reflection of what's going on within. And so, you were talking about this example of, someone who is really looking for a life partner. They want somebody to show up for them. What's that underlying need, right? And the underlying need is maybe they want someone to show up for them. They want to, um, you know, they want someone to make them feel a particular way. Well, you can do that for yourself, and when you start to do that for yourself, then you'll see that reflected in your reality. um, and so, yes, well-being. Yeah, it is such a very simple thing, and the it's really the ego, the construct of the mind, it's the chattering mind. Just from my own experience in the past of feeling so sad that, and I've had some pretty significant losses. Um, but still I could one, and I'm a human being too. So we go through grief, and losing my son, and all kinds of things that happened.
Right.
Once you have to give yourself some grace, right? And move through whatever the emotions are, because the only way out is through. But then at the end of that, once you've given yourself that time, it's very important to really choose, because I could have chosen to stay in a state of grief forever, or I can choose to see it differently and
Right.
see the beauty in what has occurred. And we always have a choice. It's a choice, no matter what happens in the world, no matter who's in charge of our country, no matter whether we have a partner, no matter whether, we just lost our job. It's a choice. And that's
Well,
my experience.
yeah, no, thank you so much. There's so much there. Let's talk about choice. Um, it's also a very difficult topic to speak about. In my experience, I would say that I really do not, I can't choose my emotions and I can't choose my moods. And I think that's something that you thought that maybe we can. And for my part, I think I cannot. I think that my moods and my emotions arrive at me. And while I can't choose them, and I can try to suppress them and I can whisk them away, and I can try to think happy thoughts, and I can try to have a positive attitude. But it seems to me that that doesn't work very well. But there is choice. I think there's choice insofar as my relationship with my mood. And I can be a moody person. And what I can do is come into relationship with my mood. I can choose to relate to my mood.
Yeah.
I can choose to, in a way, be a parent to my mood, and to, in a way, to embrace it, not to fall into it, because that's just falling into the mood, but to be a good parent with it, to allow it its space, to not. I raised 5 children. I have many grandchildren, and I will say that I think the metaphor is very good. That with regard to a parent to a child, and relating that to myself in relationship to my childish mood, because moods have no IQ, and they are not. You can't speak about adult moods or child moods. They're very childlike, generally. And the best I think I can do is to listen to it, like I would listen to a child attentively, but not be reactive to it. I think that's really what I would mean by maturity with regard to um, making good choices, being a free spirit, um, uh, being the adult in the room. And the room is myself. I think that has everything to do with well-being.
Oh,
The
yeah.
more I can be a parent to my emotional life, which is often triggered by thoughts that I'm having. My feelings and my emotions are often triggered by a thought or a judgment that I have about myself, but even more so about other people.
Mhm.
And so I have a judgment, which is, oh, you just were disrespectful to me, let's say. You walked into the room and you gave me a funny look. And now my thought is that you are disrespectful. And my feeling that I have is anger. So, how do I navigate with that in a place of well being? How do I deal with that? I can't make it go away, but I can bring awareness of what just happened.
Right.
I can own my judgment, first of all, which means that I recognize that it's coming from within myself, that it is not true that the person is necessarily disrespectful. Maybe they were late and they had a reason for being late. It wasn't a sign of their disrespect. The truth is, it's just a story that I create that then generates my feeling of being just pissed off at the person.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know. I think that gives something about what my idea about what well-being might look like. I can't whisk away anything. I can just bring more awareness to what is going on, whether it's outside of me or whether it's emotions within me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's really the story. It's the stories of our mind, the things that we create in our mind that really send us to a lower vibration. Um, and I love your uh, description of what to do with that. Is like reparenting, right? Or showing up for your emotions in a way that where you're just listening. And so that this is what the work that I do in conflict resolution. It's really, the story is important because it's that it's kind of the light bulb that goes off, like here's a story and now I'm making up all these things. But then what if you just, you know you look at the story and ask yourself, what do I need to know about how I'm feeling right now? And then the story doesn't matter, it becomes irrelevant, because what you're essentially doing is showing up for yourself, and really trying to pay attention, creating some awareness around the feeling, because the feeling that's attached to the story usually has nothing to do with the actual story. This buried emotion is attached to a wound that keeps coming up and showing itself as conflict in your life because it's ready to be healed. And so we do have to move through it, and we can't stuff it. We know that there's so much research out there that talks about um, the stuffing of emotions or not showing up as your authentic self, putting other people's relativity before your own at your own expense, creates disease, chronic suffering. So, um, yeah, I'm hearing a little bit of feedback. I'm going to turn myself down. But yeah, so I love what you said about that. It's so important to show up for yourself in that way, and be your own parent, because we all have that inner child that's not going away. And inner child healing doesn't mean making your little self grow up. It means honoring your little self and being there, for that little self. So yeah. Yeah, I love that. Thank you. And so, in talking about oneness, I mean, your book sort of like describes for the reader, you know, what it is. It's just, it's very simple terms, but it's mind blowing because, it's like you're talking about, oh, this is how everything formed. And then now, here we are in these different particles and we're having these experiences and we're being conditioned in particular ways that are making us forget our connection with each other. And it's very beautifully done. Your book is brilliant. And
Thank you.
yes.
I'm so excited about it's kind of a sequel to the book. And I don't know, would it be appropriate to talk about this? It's an idea that kind of follows on the well of being, but you guide me here. There are things to talk about on the well of being, but my mind is, my thoughts are on the puzzle that the second book has presented to me.
Oh yeah, I would love to know more about it. The viewers will have watched your video of you reading the book and the images in the book, hopefully before listening to this.
All right, so let me just make a stab at this, and this may be totally inarticulate, but let me give it a shot.
All right.
So here's a thought that is maybe your viewers will not agree with, but I'm going to put it in anyway. It has to do with the Old Testament. It begins with this assumption that the Old Testament, which is a very thorny, dark, I would say painful document, is at the foundation, or at a foundation of our Western culture. Okay, so that's the first thought. I think very few people could disagree with that. Its influence is just incalculable. So there's this character in the book called Abraham, and Abraham is the path founder for the three major religions of our Western culture, right? Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. He is the father of all three of them. Now, here's a puzzle. At the core of his story is the story of him sacrificing his beloved son at the behest of God, the creator, the loving creator of the universe, all-knowing, all-powerful, who sends his beloved servant, Abraham, on the most effed up mission that could possibly be devised. That is at the core of this character. And this character is at the core of the spiritual tradition of our entire Western culture. And we look at the story and we are either we are revolted by it, improperly revolted, because it's such an awful, it's awful on the part of Abraham to accept the challenge, and it's even worse on the part of his God to send him off on this mission. So that's what the book wants to answer, that question. Should I go on?
Yes, please.
Okay. So here are a couple of questions on this story, this narrative. Why would God send him on such a mission? Why would he do such a thing? If he is a loving God, which is the claim of these three religions, Why would his servant Abraham, who is a warrior for justice, accept it? Not only does he accept it, but if you look at the text, and this is the most amazing text you could possibly spend time with, he is up in a flash. In fact, it says he got up early in the morning and he saddled his donkey to go out on this mission to kill his son. Why didn't he bother to argue? Why? Because he argued earlier, arguing in the famous story of Sodom, when God tells him, I'm going to destroy this town, this city. And Abraham argues on their behalf, saying, well, what if there are 50 righteous people? Are you going to destroy this town? What if they're 45? What if they're 40? What if they're 30? Would you still do it? And he has this pretty fierce argument with God, saying, well, if you're a God of justice, why would you bother doing this?
Yeah.
But he doesn't do that at all with his son, whom he adores, who is innocent. So here's even a bigger puzzle to the story. When Abraham completes the test, and he takes his son, and they go out to Mount Moriah, and he's about to kill his son, God tells him, okay, don't do that. Okay, I get it, Abraham. That was really cool. But he doesn't say, you should never do such a thing. Killing children is an awful thing. It is a prohibition, and later on in the Bible it explains that this is prohibited. But he doesn't do that. In fact, he says, okay, now I'm going to reward you. You're going to have, nations are going to come out of you and wonderful things. So what is this about? So I think this is about. I actually think it's about well-being, and that Abraham that this story is about the pursuit of well-being. But there's a way you have to read it a certain way. So I'm going to say this, and it's going to take me like another 2 minutes to explain this. Because the story, I'm going to argue, is not a story about morality or the immorality of child sacrifice, I'm going to say that the story, the invitation that God presents to Abraham, is an invitation to kill the ego, the separate self, that's what it is. And there's a lot of evidence in the text itself that suggests that this might be so. It has to do with who Isaac is, why he would represent, it's not so much the ego, but it's the separate self, which is what separates us from oneness. The more I think of myself as separated from the world, as an agent divorced from the rest of the world, isolate, the more I am likely to be frightened, to feel alone, in short, I think to be, the threat of being out of well-being is immense when I feel disconnected from a larger oneness of which I'm a part. So just to finish with the story and what I think the message is that Abraham takes his separate self, and he is absolutely willing to do this. This is why he has no argument with God. And this is why God invites him to do this. Because God wants Abraham to be close to him, and Abraham wants to be close to, I don't even like to use the word God, but I prefer to use the word oneness. Yeah. That our egoic selves clearly are a problem for those of us who are on a spiritual path. The punchline, I think, of the story is that an angel comes and tells him not to kill Isaac, not to kill the separate self. Why? Because we need it. In a sense, we need our egoic self in order to find our way in the world and make a difference in it, to impact the world, to participate, if you will, in this amazing creation that we're a part of. And we participate through how we behave and deal with our egoic selves. It's not to be eviscerated. It's not to be, it's to be transcended, but it's to be embraced as well, just like Abraham embraces or protects the separate self at the end of the day. And why his ability to listen to God is so rewarded. And finally, why I think it is at the seed of our Western culture. That it's really the celebration, in a sense, of the separate self, to give it its place and become, if you want, artists of the self. I just made that up, but I think that's a nice term, to be self-creators. So that we can assist, if you want, and be participants in this creation.
Yeah, I love that. That's a wonderful.
So I did that with pictures also.
Yes.
All in an illustrated children's book for adults.
Oh, wow. I can't wait to see it. So
thank you for allowing me to put that out. That's the first time I'm putting this out, if you will, in public, that I have this book and what it's about. And yes, okay.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And this story there's so much to it, right? And yes, we cannot be in this place, as human beings in these bodies without the ego. We have what we need, right? And so there's nothing that's a part of us that we need to push away. But
so what do you mean by the ego, if I may?
I mean,
what does that mean to you?
Yeah, so I'm thinking of the ego in terms of the identities that we take on, the defense mechanisms that we take on, and we're not aware of this, when we're very young. We're just our authentic selves, but then we find very quickly that we must preserve our attachments. And so with that idea in mind, we as children adapt to the environment in whatever way we need to, and then the ego, it starts to form and turn into defense mechanisms that we carry throughout our lives. And so, it's not necessary to get rid of that. It's necessary to understand it and love it, whatever it is that we've piled on ourselves, in layers, in order to survive, because that's what we're doing as children. We're trying to adapt so we can be cared for, through our attachments. But then on some level, we don't lose our authenticity. We just kind of push it to the side. And that's the opposite of well-being, placing attachments before authenticity. And so when you can come back to yourself, and I'm talking about all identities. So, in the story that you just told, your child is a product of you, but doesn't belong to you. So, you've got this very different human being, apart from Abraham, but also in his mind, it's him too, because as parents, I mean, being a parent is a very difficult incarnation. And so you tend to look at your children as an extension of you. That becomes part of your identity. I know that was part of mine. And I felt sort of like Job. I just kept losing and losing and losing on there's nothing else to lose. There's literally nothing else. Every part of my identity, every identity that I piled on was stripped off.
You're speaking about the loss of your son. Is that what
Yeah.
you're speaking? Yes,
And
okay.
and so
That's right.
in the same year, basically lost. Well, I lost my son, a best friend, my father, and then the next year was my son's dad. He was he couldn't handle the loss of our son, and then my career. I lost. I mean, my marriage, everything, and I was like, there's nothing left but me. Nothing. It's just me. All the identities, of wife and daughter and mother and communications executive, and all these things were no longer a part. I mean, they're a part of me, they always will be, but I'm no longer moving through the world as that. So then there's only one question left, and that's, who am I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful little exercise that you might, that your listeners might want to do. It's really nice. You do it with a partner. You face each other face to face, two chairs, close but not touching. And one of them says, "Who are you?" And the other person answers, "Do you know this exercise? It's really nice." The other one says, "Oh, I'm an artist." And then you say, "Thank you." And then repeat the question, "Who are you?" And they say, "Well, I'm a father. I'm a husband. Thank you. Who are you?" And you just keep going, just very simple. And whatever comes up, who are you? I'm I'm an American. I'm white. I'm a male. I'm Jewish. I'm 65 years old. Thank you. Who are you? And just keep going. And it's very interesting what happens. It's exactly what you just described. These identities begin to peel away, and you get more and more essential. And then what you do in this exercise, you switch after, maybe you go on for a few minutes, just, feel it out. Then you switch and you let the person who made the inquiry answer the questions. So it's a very nice kind of Buddhist kind of question exercise. Very beautiful.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, it's always in the simplicity of, that's really what your book is about. It's the beauty in the simplicity. It's what we already know. It's like we don't have to, you know, we don't have to learn. We just need to remember. And there's the beauty. It's the beauty in the simplicity. It really is. I mean, to have a question, an exercise that's only asking one question over and over again, and then you get to this place.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Love it.
Yeah. So these are crazy times, and it's very important not to get lost. We were talking before we began this interview about that. You made a comment about that, how you're taking care of yourself by keeping somewhat away from the media, which just wants you. Whatever else we might say about the media and what it is, it wants you to worry. It wants you to worry and worry. And not only to worry, but to feel almost helpless, I think. And that will be, in a way, like there's nothing else to do except to be helpless, to feel, and that's almost like the most mature position you can take, I think, in the media world, to feel like there's nothing to be done, but you should only worry more. As if worrying, the more you worry, the more mature you are, the more you are, the more moral you are. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's
Everything's
an
kind of,
inversion of what it needs to be. That our idea of our value is almost somehow proportionate to how anxious we should feel in the world today. It's really messed up because it's not that at all. And we can't really even allow ourselves in this political climate, at least in the United States, to not be opinionated, to know that we really don't know all that much, to not have a stand on every damn position about everything.
yeah.
And of course, this whole identity, this identity politics that is saturating our country is, I think it's interesting in light of that exercise. Who are you? Really, really, really deep down, who are you? Because it's none of those things that I itemized about myself. I'm really not any of those things. Not really. And it's not that hard to get past them. But I think that the world is going in the opposite direction, into just a more and more identification with your little party. And even to say so is dangerous.
Yeah.
Even to talk against it and say, no, there's clearly a deeper unity to things than this divisiveness. So, yeah, that's disheartening. And I can only say that I think that we are moving necessarily through this chapter so that we can get to the other side. And there is another side. It's toward well-being. This is what we are all after. Say what you will. That's what we all want. Even though it doesn't look it, it's what we're all after. And we're all after that oneness that, upholds everything. And it doesn't have any words. And many of the words that we use now are somewhat toxic. Like the word God, it's really kind of, it's politicized. It's better not to use it, I think, because we mean too many different things by it, and they're all so small.
Yeah, we to spend all of our time, well, I'm gonna say all of our time, but much of our time, defending a position or, I don't know, politics to me feels like football. Choose a team,
Right. It's really a very egoic experience.
Yeah.
When I get involved in politics, man, my ego is flying. And I have to, when I'm right, it's such a satisfaction for my ego.
Right.
And I might be right. And I'm often right in an argument, or I can make myself appear right in an argument. I think I can argue pretty well. Doesn't mean, it just means that my ego gets excited and is effective. And but it's really of very little value. I'm learning more and more that having conversation around politics is extremely difficult. It's important, but it's very, very, very difficult. Do you find that?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Do you find it? Have you had recently a really a deep, interesting conversation that was about politics?
Yeah. Yeah. I look at when this has so much to do, this is an ongoing thing. When Trump was first elected, I was doing conflict resolution work. And so my teacher decided in a workshop that we would do a community circle around it, because there was so much pain. I felt like another death had happened. I cried for 2 weeks. I was in panic, not in well-being or happiness. And so we did a community circle, and there was one person who voted for Trump, and everybody else, all the other people, voted the other way. And we're all talking and using reflective listening. And at the end, what happens? It's very simple questions. Like, who are you? What do you want known about how you are with this event and its consequences? Was the question. And you can choose anyone to reflect it back, or everyone. And when that starts to happen, the reflective listening, and you feel heard and understood, you can then open up the space to hear and understand others. And it doesn't have to be necessarily anyone in the room who is has a different perspective than you. You'll just get the knowingness of the perspective of the people who chose to act in a different way than you did. And we left that exercise feeling a profound level of compassion for those people who voted in the other way. And that was very healing. It was about a year after the past, back then, 4 years ago. So it was about a year after Trump was first elected. And so because of that experience, I have been thinking about it a little bit differently now, over the years. And I don't want to make any more fear-based decisions. I don't want to participate in, a political system that is designed to divide and conquer and create fear, and create the perception that we've got this freedom to vote, when the outcome is always half of the people, are being supported and the other half are not. It doesn't feel good in any part of my body or my psyche, and I don't want to participate.
I just lost you there because I got a Skype call.
Oh, you did.
I did. So.
Yeah, you gotta love it. Being live it is what it is. We're not doing any edits, so this is good.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, it was a thing. And so recently, I'm noticing, in my family, like, we start talking and everyone's worried and they're scared that Trump's going to be reelected and all the things. And I'm like, how have you been impacted? We know there's a pandemic, the whole world's been impacted, so, but we all want to do that parental transference where we need somebody to take care of us because we're not parenting ourselves. We're not taking care of ourselves. We're not showing up for ourselves. So we need this person on TV who we're never going to meet. We're never going to really understand the back room politics of every decision that is made. We don't see the corporations that are running the show in the background. And we want this person to be our dad, and like take care of us. And then we get really upset when we don't like our parent. We don't like the transference that we've created for ourselves. And so my question always is, why do you listen to the news? I need to be informed is the answer. Well, what do you plan to do about it? What action will you take? Will you run for office? Well, I mean, there's a million ways you could take action on the information that you hear, but really it's designed to make you feel helpless. And so you cast your vote, and then you judge other people for voting different than you, or you judge people for not participating in the process. And what does that say? Well, how is that your mirror? And so I've had these conversations trying to make people feel better, and I trigger them worse, and I don't mean to, but again, I'm their mirror. So however they're responding is what's a reflection of what's going on within them, and it's really just fear. And you know I will not participate in a divide and conquer um, political system when clearly it doesn't have to be that way. There are nations that don't operate in this manner. So that's where I'm at. And I just, I also have faith in oneness and our connection, and, in universal consciousness, and the knowing that we all embody, even though we're in this forgetting place, we, we know. And I don't want to put out violence into the world, through my words, or, you know, my feelings against another person. And I don't care who they are. I don't care what human being it is. I won't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And my hope is that.
So what you're saying is you're not going to speak ill of anyone? Is that what I'm hearing?
That is my intention. My ego, may, push me in that direction at times, but I can check myself.
Right.
I don't really see the value in talking about how ignorant the United States president is, and how orange he is, or how this he is, or how narcissistic he is, or that. There's no value in that for me. It doesn't make me feel good. And really that's just keeping keeping people kind of stuck in this place, where if you're kind of, showing up and validating other people, in their fears, and like, yes, you're right, this is terrible, and what are you going to do about it? And you're keeping them down and keeping them stuck, instead of encouraging them to show up for themselves. And when you show up for yourself, and you can recognize things that you couldn't recognize before, like the possibilities start to show up. But when you're in a place where it's somebody else's fault, and all this blame, you're just in a place of the known. You're stuck in the past, in these past experiences that keep kind of showing up for you over and over again. That's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a thorny thing. In my family, it's a very, the spectrum on which my family stands. I'll say there are, not including all the grandchildren, I have 5 children, and they're married, and they vary greatly in their points of view politically, religiously, in their values. They vary greatly. And but what is really important? I think it is to maintain a caring, loving, respectful space for everyone. Families are very difficult. They're the most difficult entities there are. As a spiritual teacher, Ramdas said, if you think you're enlightened, just go spend a couple of weeks with your family. And I love that. I love that quip. Because we're so triggered and we have such expectations. And if you're able, Sarah, to maintain equanimity and to not speak ill or think ill of the members of your family. That is an amazing accomplishment. I think a spiritual accomplishment. And I like to think, when I look at my family, that's what I see. I see deep respect across the board and very different lives being lived. You know, how can we judge other people, really? We have barely a grasp of how to live our own lives, let alone, you know, assume that we know how other people should or should not live their lives.
Right. I mean, we're
It's
thinking.
a complicated subject. It's not simple, but there's discernment and there's judgment, and I would make a similar distinction between discernment and judgment as I did between happiness and well-being. They appear similar, but they're very different, and the difference has to do with one's own consciousness.
Yeah.
So I do need to go to my next task, if you will.
I could talk to you for hours about all of this.
It's been a real pleasure, Sarah.
Yeah, it really has. Thank you so very much. And the viewers can find you on Facebook, and we'll put your links up on the website and all that stuff. But thank you so much. I mean, the last thing that you said about the difference between judgment and discernment, we really do need some new language to explain connection and oneness, and you know, and so that's something to consider, you know, just in thinking about this concept as we go through the week of videos. So thank you so much, Jean-Pierre, for being here. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk again.
Yes.
All the best.
All the best. Take care.